On Wednesday, the 25th of January 2023, at 7 a.m., police gathered outside a family home in Poynton, Cheshire. Inside were 5 children still getting ready for the day, and 2 adults already under months of suspicion. 6 years earlier, in the summer of 2017, an undercover officer dialed a number in Cheetham Hill, Manchester. On the other end wasn't a dealer, but a young mother quietly arranging the supply of cocaine and heroin. And in 2020, behind the walls of Forest Bank Prison, a tiny mobile phone was switched on. From that cell, commands were sent out silently. On the outside, his girlfriend followed every instruction. Even her own mother was drawn into the line. 3 different years, 3 different places, yet each revealed the same pattern: women running supply lines from inside Britain's homes. This is the story of the women who quietly fueled Britain's cocaine networks, and how ordinary houses became the front line of organised crime. Welcome to UK True Crime Files. Let's get straight into the case. Copperfield Road, Poynton, a quiet residential street on the edge of the Peak District, lined with modest family homes. Among them, one house drew the attention of Cheshire police. It was the home of Chantel Jackson, 37, her partner Joshua Harrison, 34, and 5 children. 4 were Jacksons from a previous relationship. The 5th she shared with Harrison. What appeared to be a typical family home was, according to intelligence, doubling as the base of a small but organised drugs operation. Police had been monitoring the address for months, gathering evidence that cocaine and cannabis were being supplied directly from inside. The contrast was stark. Behind the same walls where children prepared for school, conversations were taking place about cash, quantities, and regular customers. Jackson's role was described as acting almost like a secretary for Harrison, logging payments, responding to messages, keeping track of money and supply. Harrison, meanwhile, was considered the lead. Already known to officers for past drug offences and violence, his record included 2 previous drug convictions, as well as battery, criminal damage, and common assault. Jackson herself had no prior convictions, yet investigators soon learned her involvement went further than being a passive partner. Phone records showed she was in direct contact with users, confirming amounts, arranging supply, and ensuring payments were collected. The picture formed by police was one of domestic life and criminal business running side by side. In the evenings, Jackson and Harrison were still posting selfies on Facebook as though family life was untouched. But intelligence reports suggested the opposite, that drug dealing was part of the household routine. By late January 2023, the intelligence gathered was enough to secure a warrant. Officers prepared to move on the address, knowing they were not only entering a suspected drugs den, but also a home where 5 children were present. The stage was set for the raid. On the morning of the 25th of January 2023, officers moved in. After months of intelligence gathering, the warrant for Copperfield Road was finally executed. Inside, the contrast between family life and criminal business was laid bare. The search quickly uncovered physical evidence of drug supply. On a bedside table, officers found cannabis weighing 14.4 grams, valued at around $110 to $150. Alongside it were snap bags, the small resealable pouches routinely used in street dealing. Traces of cocaine were identified on surfaces and equipment throughout the property. In addition, steroids were recovered, broadening the scope of the substances being handled within the house. But it wasn't only the drugs themselves that raised alarms. Investigators seized 14 electronic devices from rooms throughout the home: iPhones, Nokias, and other handsets. Some were hidden, like a phone tucked away in an airing cupboard. Others were out in the open. Each device carried potential evidence showing how communication and coordination of the supply line had been run. The search also turned up scales. Forensic analysis later confirmed traces of both cannabis and cocaine on them. This wasn't casual possession. The equipment showed active preparation for onward supply. Combined with the devices, officers were presented with the infrastructure of a small but organised operation, conducted from within the family setting. Harrison was arrested at the scene. Jackson, by contrast, was not detained immediately. Instead, she was invited to attend a voluntary interview several months later. Both gave no comment responses when questioned. But by then, the evidence held in the devices was already painting a detailed picture of how the couple's operation worked. What was revealed through the phones and their messages gave weight to what police had already suspected about Jackson's role. Far from being a bystander, she was in regular contact with customers. In one text exchange, a user asked if she was still active. Jackson replied with a simple offer, a deal for $30 cash. When the user said he only had $20 available, she provided Harrison's bank details, allowing the balance to be transferred electronically. Other messages highlighted the financial tracking she kept on Harrison's behalf. In one, Harrison told her that a customer had paid $120. Jackson itemized the payment, noting it had been received in 3 separate installments of $60, $30, and $30. She then confirmed that $1,360 was in the tin, a reference to the cash box where money was being stored. The exchanges showed a system that combined cash handling with bank transfers, ensuring no sale was lost, even when buyers lacked cash in hand. Customers could still secure their supply by sending money directly into Harrison's account. Jackson also messaged individuals directly, checking if they wanted to complete deals. In one message to a contact named Matt, she asked if he still wanted a deal. Other messages later presented in court showed regular and active involvement in both arranging supply and confirming payments. Taken together, the seized cannabis, traces of cocaine, the scales, the electronic devices, and the phone evidence created a comprehensive case. It showed how the family home on Copperfield Road was being used not only as a base for storage, but as the administrative center of the supply line, with Jackson directly involved in its daily running. On the 26th of March 2024, the case came before Chester Crown Court. Both Joshua Harrison and Chantel Jackson entered guilty pleas to being concerned in the supply of Class A and Class B drugs. For Harrison, the outcome was immediate custody. At 34, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. His record weighed heavily in the decision. The court was told that he had been the driving force of the operation from inside the family home. Jackson, however, faced a different outcome. Judge Patrick Thompson described the situation as finely balanced. On one hand, Jackson's active involvement in drug trafficking could have led to an immediate custodial sentence. On the other, the impact on her children was judged to be substantial personal mitigation. Her case was argued in the context of her domestic circumstances. Her defense stressed that she was operating under pressure from Harrison. The prosecution itself acknowledged there were elements of domestic abuse in the relationship. It wasn't constant, but Jackson said it made her feel pressured to keep him happy. Chantel Jackson was given 2 years suspended for 2 years, along with 200 hours of unpaid work and 20 days of rehabilitative activity. While Jackson walked free under suspension in Cheshire, another mother was about to face prison after running a drug line from her own home in Manchester. In Cheetham Hill, Manchester, the drug trade wasn't confined to street corners. For Katie Baldwin, a 27-year-old mother of 3, it began inside her own home. Her children were aged just 4, 8, and 10. From that living room, she took on a role that kept a supply line running while her partner served time behind bars. The line she operated was known among users as the Snickers line. It was a contact point addicts could call to arrange cocaine and heroin. Baldwin's task was simple but central: answer the phone, take details, and connect users to dealers on the street. She acted as the switchboard, quietly directing the flow of drugs into the hands of customers. Her boyfriend, 29-year-old Asghar, had been the man behind the line before prison. He had a reputation in Cheetham Hill and had already built up contacts and regular users. When he was jailed, the risk was that his business would collapse. His conviction was for offenses linked to supplying Class A drugs, the very trade that had underpinned his control of the Snickers line. Baldwin stepped in to ensure that didn't happen. Through Baldwin, Asghar's line survived his absence. On some occasions, Baldwin did more than pass messages. Evidence later revealed that she went out herself, supplying dealers with fresh stock when they ran low. Sometimes it was by car, other times by bike. However it was done, the supply chain stayed intact. The picture that emerged was of a young mother running an illicit hotline on behalf of her partner in prison. She wasn't just covering for him temporarily, she was keeping the business alive, ensuring his contacts had no reason to turn elsewhere. Police would later confirm that Baldwin played what they described as a managerial role while Asghar was away. The Snickers line was never allowed to go silent, and as the months passed, the operation drew closer to exposure, not from rival gangs or missed payments, but from the undercover officers already circling Cheetham Hill. Greater Manchester Police had been watching Cheetham Hill for some time. The area had become notorious for street dealing, where Class A drugs were available within minutes of a call. Violence between rival groups and the litter of discarded needles and wraps had turned parts of the neighborhood into what officers described as no-go zones. Operation Danube was launched to cut into that supply. It was a long-running investigation targeting multiple lines feeding heroin and cocaine to addicts across Manchester. Central to the inquiry was the Snickers line, still active even while its original operator was behind bars. One of the most significant tools in the investigation was an undercover officer identified only as Jay. His role was to pose as a customer, calling the line repeatedly to demonstrate his reliability and to secure evidence of supply. Between July 2017 and April 2018, Jay called the Snickers line 19 times. Each time, the operation ran smoothly. A voice on the other end, often Baldwin's, would take the order. Dealers on the ground would be dispatched. The handover of Class A drugs was completed in the open. When Asghar was released, the operation continued seamlessly. The undercover officer made 13 more calls to the same number. Again, drugs were supplied without disruption. Code names were used on the calls. One dealer, identified by the nickname Brandy, was dispatched multiple times to deliver wraps. The evidence showed a functioning business model, even without Asghar. The scale of the operation was revealed in the arrests that followed. 11 suspects were detained as part of the wider investigation into Cheetham Hill's lines. When Baldwin's home was searched, officers found $2,610 in cash. The money was seized as criminal property, reinforcing her role not only in managing calls, but in handling the financial side of the trade. Operation Danube painted a clear picture. Far from being a temporary substitute for her partner, Baldwin had become an essential part of the Snickers line. She ensured the orders kept coming, the dealers kept working, and the money kept flowing. When the case came before Manchester Crown Court, the roles of each defendant were set out clearly. The evidence was overwhelming. Baldwin entered guilty pleas to 2 charges, being concerned in the supply of Class A drugs and possession of criminal property. Asghar, meanwhile, was dealt with separately. He too was convicted for his role in the line, described as a leader, the one who had built the network before his arrest. Baldwin had simply stepped in to ensure it continued in his absence. Asghar was eventually sentenced to 5 years in custody for his part in the conspiracy. For Baldwin, her defense focused heavily on her background and circumstances. It was argued that she had been drawn into the role by loyalty to her partner and that her primary concern was still for her 3 children. Counsel told the court that she had wanted a better life for them and that she now recognized how her involvement had put that at risk. When it came to sentencing, the judge made clear how serious her crimes were. The judge also underlined the corrosive impact of Cheetham Hill's drug trade. Lines like Snickers, he said, fueled addiction, drew in violence, and left entire neighborhoods scarred. Katie Baldwin was sentenced to 3 years in custody, while Baldwin's downfall exposed how a single phone line could run a cocaine network in Salford. Another young woman was preparing to take orders straight from a prison cell and even draw her own mother into the trade. In Salford, the flow of Class A drugs did not stop at the gates of Forest Bank Prison. From inside, 32-year-old Ashley Blackett was still issuing instructions. He had access to a tiny Zanko mobile phone smuggled into his cell, and through it, the outside world remained firmly under his control. On the other side of those messages was his girlfriend, Jamie Lee Brooke Parkinson. She was just 27, a mother of young children. And from her home in Swinton, she became the point of contact for Blackett's trade. The content of the exchanges revealed more than loyalty. They exposed the mechanics of a supply line being operated in real time from a prison cell. Blackett gave detailed instructions, how money should be moved through accounts, where collections should take place, and even how to use scales and equipment to prepare the drugs for sale. He directed her not only on daily activity, but on how to prepare for the future. When he was released, he wanted to expand. In one recovered exchange, Blackett told her they would be building an empire together. Brooke Parkinson replied with confidence, "We'll smash it." She wasn't just maintaining his operation, she was actively engaged in the idea of turning it into something larger. Evidence also showed her promoting the line on Snapchat and Instagram, pushing the business in the same digital spaces used for everyday life. Social media and encrypted apps became the dual channels through which cocaine was advertised and supplied. Blackett had access to illicit phones in custody. In one exchange, when Brooke Parkinson asked if he had taken a slug, he responded with a photo from inside his cell, a line of white powder racked out, evidence that he was consuming the same drugs he was supplying. For investigators, the messages pulled back the curtain on how organized crime could thrive, even when its supposed leader was behind bars. Through illicit phones smuggled into prison and a girlfriend on the outside, Blackett's business not only survived, but began preparing to grow. The seized devices revealed not only the mechanics of a drug business, but the lifestyle that came with it. Designer goods and expensive purchases became a hallmark of the money being moved through their hands. On one occasion, Brooke Parkinson spent $500 on a pair of Valentino trainers for Blackett while he was still inside Forest Bank. Other images recovered by police showed her bed covered in shopping bags stacked with high-end clothing. When a friend asked the cost of one delivery, she replied, $3,380. But the most striking images weren't of trainers or dresses. Investigators found photos of perfume boxes, not filled with cosmetics, but with cash. One Yves Saint Laurent gift box was photographed with bundles of banknotes inside. She captioned it with casual pride, "My little stash box." The financial side was reinforced by further images uncovered during the investigation. Screenshots of bank cards and account details were stored, evidence that payments for drugs were being made not only in cash, but also through electronic transfers. The line was flexible, accommodating users who couldn't always bring cash in hand. Jamie Lee Brooke Parkinson was not acting alone. Her mother, 47-year-old Wendy Brooke, became directly involved, supplying cannabis to her own circle of contacts. Messages exchanged between mother and daughter showed not just casual reference, but active participation in the trade. In one conversation, Jamie Lee instructed her mum to keep proper records, to note what had been sold and what stock was left. The partnership of mother and daughter blurred the line between family life and drug dealing. There were also discussions about Wendy's beautician business. In court, the Crown pointed to messages suggesting that her partner was putting money through it. Prosecutors argued that the salon could have been used as a front for laundering drug money, masking illicit profits beneath the appearance of legitimate income. The wider network extended beyond family. Ashley Blackett relied on a close circle of trusted associates. His brother Wesley was identified as one of those involved, as was Christopher Taylor, described in court as his right-hand man. Together they formed the structure beneath him, ensuring his instructions were carried out on the outside. The messages also revealed the undercurrent of violence that ran through the operation. Beyond the logistics of cash and stock, Blackett gave orders about punishing those who fell into debt. References were made to damaging property, a tactic used to enforce payment and deter delays. By mid-2020, investigators had gathered enough evidence to act. On the 16th of June 2020, police moved in. Brooke Parkinson was arrested at her home in Swinton. The search uncovered 14.37 grams of cocaine at 81% purity, alongside 27 resealable bags, each containing traces of white powder. Officers also seized multiple devices, capturing the trail of messages that had tied her to Blackett's prison phone. Further arrests followed across the network. Wendy Brooke, 47, was detained for her role in supplying cannabis and later admitted her part in the conspiracy. Blackett's brother Wesley and close associate Christopher Taylor were also named in the investigation, each identified in the communication threads that showed them working on his behalf. The police action was the culmination of months of surveillance and forensic analysis. Devices were examined, message logs cross-referenced, and cash flows traced. The raid confirmed what detectives had pieced together, that a prisoner was directing a supply line through his partner, extending it into her own family and trusted circle. The case came before Manchester Crown Court in July 2021. At its centre was Jamie Lee Brooke Parkinson, who admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. She was sentenced to 3 years in custody. The judge made clear that her actions had gone beyond simply following instructions from her imprisoned partner. She had taken an active role in keeping the cocaine business running. Her mother, Wendy Brooke, faced lesser charges. She admitted conspiracy to supply Class B drugs, linked to the cannabis she had been selling within her own circle. For her, the court imposed a 12-month community order with 15 days of rehabilitation activity requirements and 100 hours of unpaid work. Blackett himself was still facing separate proceedings. The prison-based evidence ultimately led to his later conviction in February 2023. He was sentenced to 12.5 years in custody. His brother Wesley, who had been part of the outside network, received 5.5 years. Christopher Taylor was jailed for 7 years. Together, their sentences reflected the scale of the operation directed from within Forest Bank. What do you think about these cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of UK True Crime Files.